recount the history of Peradeniya, because as you know, I am no historian, nor am I a great public speaker. About the topic that has been given to me, the history of the University of Peradeniya. Like all great institutions of learning, or most great institutions of learning, the origin of Peradeniya is also shrouded in a certain amount of mystery. When exactly we started, we can't pinpoint. Some would prefer the 5th of April, 1942, the day on which Colombo was bombed by the Japanese, but the day on which the legislature passed the legal framework upon which this institution is based. It specifically states that the National University would be established in a site in Kandy. It also says that it would be a unitary, autonomous and residential university. So that's the starting point which some would select. Another possible starting point is 1944. That's 70 years ago, I think, when the land grant that enabled the establishment of the university here was announced as a royal decree. That too is a good starting point for the history of the university. Then we come to the 1950s, the arrival of the Faculty of Agriculture here, or the beginning of courses in agriculture here. I remember Professor Reggie Appadore telling us once at a committee meeting that the pioneers of Peradeniya University were the agriculture students who began their courses somewhere in 1951, I believe. Then my great friend, the late Professor Leslie Gunawardena, in his preface to the volume he edited in 1992, it is titled "More Open Than Usual?" Leslie places the beginning of the university for some reason at the arrival of the arts faculty in Peradeniya in October 1952. But now, as the present Vice Chancellor and the Deputy Vice Chancellor have decided, the obvious place for us to start this history is the formal opening of the university by the Duke of Edinburgh and his wife, Queen Elizabeth. That was a unique ceremony because I was told that that's the only ceremony held anywhere in the world where the Queen was upstaged by her husband. The only ceremony where the husband was the key man. He opened the university to be more open than usual. Now, we'll start. Wherever we start, it doesn't matter. Whatever time we select to look back on our history in a critical way is okay. So this ceremony is very appropriate. It's a good time to review the university, see what we have achieved, and also maybe even to see what we have failed to achieve. So about the topic that has been given to me by Chancellor, with your permission, I would like to modify it somewhat for the reason that you cannot narrate a history of an institution like this in just 40 minutes. That's just not on. Now, when thinking about how I should handle this topic, I thought one of the obvious options I have is to speak about the history of this place, the Arts Theatre, and recount to you some of the events that took place within these four walls, and to tell you or let you think how the cultural history of this university community is reflected in those events that I select. One of the obvious advantages of this approach is, of course, that I can be stopped at any time. All you need to do is to tell me now, enough is enough, you stop. And I can stop my narration at any point without a great deal of embarrassment, because in any case, that kind of history has a tendency to fizzle out. In fact, that is a characteristic of all history, I think, modern history especially. History has a tendency to fizzle out. So let it be my narrative here. Now, most of the events that I will be recounting have been witnessed by me. I have seen them. There are one or two exceptions which I am basing on the university records. But I'll not make it an autobiography. I'll keep the autobiography part of it to the minimum, because I don't want to speak about what I did or what I saw, but what generally happened here within these four walls. Now, I would like to start with what Sir Ivor Jennings, the founder Vice-Chancellor, referred to categorically as the first convocation of the University of Ceylon. It was held in October 1952, a few months after the arrival of the art faculty here. It was held here, and I refer to that event for two reasons. One is that Sir Ivor, in his oration, made it explicitly clear that this place is not a lecture hall of the Faculty of Arts. It is a all-university center. In fact, the gateway to the entire University of Ceylon, part of it was still in Colombo. That's how this arts theatre must be looked at. It's by no means it's a infrastructure of the art faculty. It's an all-university building. It's an all-university venue. In fact, the first convocation and the second convocation were held here, and the degrees in all the degrees across the board, medicine, engineering, agriculture, veterinary science, dental sciences, arts, oriental studies, the entire gamut of faculties were held here. Degrees were awarded here, and if you look at the list of the people who received the degree, you will find names of some of the most illustrious people in this country. So this is not just arts theatre. Doesn't mean a theatre for conducting arts lectures. It's a whole university gateway. That is why it is located along the highway, unlike the other buildings of the university, which are some distance away from the highway that runs through the campus. Now, this is a fascinating place. It has been a venue of many things. It has been a venue of, let me say, teaching and some amount of learning, a place of religious piety. Then it has been a place of hope, place of despair, place of tragedy, place of comedy, place of great intellectual attainment, place of entertainment, place of ragging, place of stupidity, place of mob violence, all that. Now all that would reflect the history of this place. Let me be a little more specific. Now when I say that this place was convocation hall, I refer to the first two convocation. Actually, there was one convocation held before that, which Sir Ivor Jennings referred to as just a foundation laying ceremony. The laying of the foundation of the university across there on the Convocation Hill by the Duke of Gloucester. Now, the interesting thing about that convocation was that it was a non-convocation in the first place, and also that convocation building to which he laid foundations never came into being. We are still waiting for the convocation hall to be built. I think the only part of that convocation building that was built was the Sandakada Pahana, a unique place of carving on rock carving. I don't think you get that kind of carving so large and so beautiful even at Anuradhapura. So it's there somewhere there, I guess. It's there adjacent to the Senate building today. Anyway, that building never came into being. And until the gymnasium became the venue of convocations, this was the convocation hall. Now, the convocation was important for another reason as well. Sir Ivor, he was, of course, as you know, a very great scholar. He had recognition as an expert in constitution and law before he came here and before he reached the age of 40. And his writings on the British Constitution, on cabinet government, are considered as classics in those subjects even today. So actually, it is a cause for wonder why he accepted the assignment of building a new university. I suppose it must have been a great challenge to him because he was not familiar with Sri Lanka at the time he came here. Anyway, he is also a very blunt person. He criticizes where he thinks criticism is due. And he criticized the Ceylonese for their failure to appreciate the great beauty that is around them. He was referring not only to the natural beauty, the environment, but also the architectural beauty of this place. Now, in that context, he was referring to the ornamentations in and around this hall. And he said, asked his audience to speak about it. And in the course of which he recounted some of the obstacles he had in implementing the architectural proposals, first of Sir Patrick Abercrombie, and then by that great architect Alvis. He said he faced a lot of resistance, particularly from the leading politicians of the day. It is true that the Ponnambalam brothers, Jayathilaka, Mas, then Marcus Fernando, few people like that who had more or less past their prime as political leaders, gave Sir Ivor a great deal of support, gave the National University project a great deal of support ever since the blueprint of the National University was laid by the famous Riddell, Riddell-Compton Commission of 1922. They laid the foundations of this, for this university, and it was their proposals, the Riddell-Compton proposals that were converted into the National University in 1940. Anyway, he mentioned that most of the leading politicians did not like the idea of the architectural recreation of the past, which was meticulously done in Peradeniya. Because one might think that it is a mixture of Anuradhapura, Polonnaruwa, Kandyan architecture, Vyapahuva and the whole works. And it is in fact that. But somehow that held together. And it was very much national in character. And strangely enough, the Marx brothers, the leading Marxists of the country, vehemently opposed the design of this university, the architectural design and the landscape design of the university. It's a waste of money, waste of resources. Then some of the other leaders, other people who became real leaders of the country after independence, were lukewarm in their support to the university project. They were not enthusiastic. I refer specifically to, strangely, to some of the most educated people in the legislature, like S.W.R.D. Bandaranaike. He was not all that keen, possibly because he and Ivor Jennings did not get on well together, or possibly because Mr. Bandaranaike thought that the DSN Naika's project. Somehow, Sir Ivor was able to create this place, and we are very grateful to him, because when we see the architectural monstrosities that are there in some of the universities that the British built in India, we are very grateful that we are having this place, which is very definitely one of the most beautiful campuses in the world, and has been described as such by many people, not only just nationalists like some of us. Anyway, that is so much for the convocation that was held here, or the Arts Theatre as a convocation hall. Of the teaching and learning activities, I'll comment a little later. This was also a Banamaduwa, Dharmashala, where every Sunday morning, one or another of the reputed and respected monks came here and preached to very well attended audiences, including non-Buddhists. They came just to hear these famous monks speak, and I too did that, like the Vajirarama monks who were known for their scholarly erudition. So this was the place of piety, and this was also the venue for various performing arts. Some of the most interesting and colorful things that happened on this stage. I remember the musical performances by young Amaradeva. Some of the things that never go out of one's memory. They were so colorful, and interestingly, his musical and choral accompaniment was provided by our students. He didn't bring a team of musicians from Colombo. Our students accompanied him with the sitar, the violin and the flute. And the choral accompaniment was also provided by some of our students. And I can never forget some of those out-of-the-world performances by Amaradeva just after his return from Bhatkande, where I think he was at his prime. Then there were the others, the dancing performances. In one case, a small playlet was performed here. And there was a demonstration of Bharatanatyam, the finer points of Bharatanatyam. Then again, there was some Kandyan dancing or demonstration of what was called Uttara Bharatiya Ragadhari Sangeeta. We were taught the finer points of Bharata, the Raga music, so on. So this was a venue for the performing arts. Then again, there was ragging here, quite a bit of ragging. Not the indecent variety which was very much there at that time. Don't make the mistake and don't be misled by those who say that ragging was extremely decent at that time. And over the years, as the Godeyas came to this place, ragging became more and more indecent. No, that is nothing further from the truth. As I'm sure Dr. Dhanapala will recall, 3 people from my batch were sacked for indecent ragging. They were sacked, and punishment was very harsh for those who got caught ragging. But here there was some sort of entertaining ragging, for instance, ragging which some of my batchmates experienced just before our first lecture in the university began, one Monday morning in July 1960. The ragging was still on, and some of my batchmates, the larger made ones, the more prominent ones, like, it didn't matter whether they were what community they belong to, like Jolly Somasundram, Sugat Veerasooriya. We were not taken seriously because we were sort of too small in size to be taken seriously, but they were made to stand there and sing what was referred to as the University Wannama, like the Turanga Wannama and the Rajaga Wannama. Actually, it sounded something like Wannama. The type of music that you hear from today from, say, some of the pop guys who have gone back to folk. And the Vice Chancellor's permission, if I were to relate, I won't sing it. I can't sing. It's, how did it go? Danno daditya api kollo tamai ara triloka pujita vasitiye. The next verse gets a little more salty. How did it go? Danno daditya api kollo tamai ara triloka pujita vasitiye. Ballo mara hari kollo, ballo mara hari salli hoyagene. Degree gahanne kello nisai. That was the university anthem at that time. Great distance we have traveled when listening to the almost semi-classical composition that we heard a little while ago as the anthem of the Peradeniya University. We were told that that is the anthem of that. Triloka Pujita Vasitiye was the university anthem of that time, or the University Wannama. So yes, there was some ragging here, but not serious ones. I also recall that ragging was done in a very funny way, where they had to stand with their one trouser leg rolled up to the knee, and they looked really funny. And there was a lot of laughter, and then in walked the late Professor Ananda Pulasooriya. Those of you who remember him know him as one of the most, what shall I say, sedate characters of this university. Very kind, very gentle, but very gravitas. He would, tall, thin man. And what was special about Professor Ananda Pulasooriya was that he never changed over 50 years. He was here nearly 50 years, and his physical appearance never changed. So anyway, Professor Ananda Pulasooriya walked in through that door, and our raggers fled through this door. He came and said, Mama, Acharya Ananda Pulasooriya, Metana, Kolang Maduak Noimata Vagabalagate Yutui. That was his response to the ragging that was going on just before his arrival, a part of which you would have seen. Anyway, once things started here when we were students, there were many other very interesting all-university things that happened here. Among them, I would like to refer to the great debates and discussions we had on a large variety of topics. Topics of national interest, sometimes topics of international interest, topics of interest to higher education, and so on. Let me mention to you some of the things that we discussed here, sometimes very heatedly. Sometimes the participants of the debate had to be physically carried out of this hall because of their vehemence. For instance, we had a long debate on the national language policy. There are some veterans on the staff and the students' community participated. I remember the participation was certainly not confined to the art faculty. Professor Senaka Bibile spoke. Osman Jayaratna spoke. There were some of the people who, from the other faculties who participated